Okay. Hello, Paquita. How are you?
Hello, Douglas. I'm fine, thank you. And yourself?
Oh, doing all right. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, have you been a writer all your life?
I have been writing all my life, but I've only been published in the last, I had a book published in the early 2000s, and then as just a small book on a business book. But in the last, since 2014, I've had three books published. So, and I love writing. I've been writing for on travel issues for my website since 2011, and I do a lot of business writing in my work. So
Okay.
writing is something I feel very much at home with.
Well, according to your bio, you have done a lot of travel, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about a couple of them. The first one, let's start out with your latest book. I assume that's your latest book, The Cuban Approach.
The Cuban Approach is my non-business book. Yes, it's not actually the latest. I did one about realigning business following COVID. So that's really the latest. But the Cuban Approach, I wrote following a trip to my seventh, eighth trip to Cuba in 2010, I think it was 2010.
I'm assuming that you're a citizen of the UK. You have a UK passport.
I have a UK passport and I'm a joint national. I was born in Australia, so I have joint nationality.
Oh, okay. Because I know that for you guys it's easier to get to Cuba than for Americans.
For both, my first trips were when I was living in Australia. And yes, indeed, it's much easier for us. And when I was going, it was very difficult at that time for anybody from North America to get to Cuba. So that's when I first fell in love with the place.
So why did you want to go there?
I went because I went to I dance and I was dancing Argentine tango and salsa, and they have an annual my class in Australia. They have an annual trip that goes first to Buenos Aires for tango, and then on to Cuba for to the Academy of Dance for salsa. And unfortunately, my work commitments, I couldn't make it to Buenos Aires. So I met everybody along the way and joined them, and we all arrived in Havana at the same time. So it was dance that took me. As I say in the book, dance always takes you to places you never expected to go.
What year was this that you went to Cuba?
The first year that I went would have been 1999.
Cuba's been in the news lately. There's been a lot of protests going on. What was your impression of the people when you were there in terms of their contentment, if you will, with their government and with the system and just generally speaking?
This is a very complex question because there have been pluses from the revolution in healthcare and in education, and I do talk about this in the book because over the 9 years that I traveled there, um, I saw a huge change from those benefits waning. I would have to say in the extent of their application and the general decay of the system. And it's very difficult. One of the reasons I wrote the book is a lot of people say, "Oh yes, I've been to Cuba," but they've only been to a tourist resort. And Cuba is a country where you cannot criticize the government, and so nationals are naturally very careful what they say to a foreigner. But if you become trusted and travel as I did from relative to relative on the back roads of Cuba, you see the really hard life that they endure and the shortages that they have in their food is even when I went were getting extreme. Um, we see I can remember uh, I can't remember the name of the young lad who was became a big topical thing with America and they had demonstrations on the streets in Havana. Well, I was there at the time, and the people, it's highly orchestrated and televised, and the people were so fascinated with the whole thing that they were all chatting amongst themselves, and they could only raise a sort of a lukewarm yay. And so they had the pipas, the water trucks on all of the roads coming down to the T junction, that's the Malecon that runs all along the bay where you see these demonstrations. And they had recordings of very enthusiastic crowds playing from all of these as you went along. It was really interesting, and it was an anti-democracy protest highly with the old 1950s haranguing style speakers, people speaking, and the people themselves on the way had just got, at that time, just got the right to have their own small enterprises, and it was democracy all along, you know, sort of commercialism all the way along, on the way to a rally against it. So it was quite interesting. One of the things that I found, that they had almost eliminated dengue fever and yellow fever, because you got fined if you had standing water when I first went there. When I came back, I said, what's going on here with all these people with fumigators on their backs? And they said it's the government pretending they're fixing things. So and they said, look at the rubbish. And there was all the rubbish on the street and the water, standing water. Now that was never there before. And the infrastructure is just decaying around them, because it hasn't been serviced since the revolution. So it's quite tragic. So there are benefits. There's education. That's one of the most highly educated per capita and most literate in the top group in the world. And yet the tragedy is there's nowhere for those people. There are a few places for them to really employ that learning, which is sad. And one of the fellows, who was an early friend of mine because he was in travel, he was part of the revolution and really believed in it. And he said to me, you've been coming here for so long, what do you think about what has transpired and what have we achieved? That's a very difficult answer to diplomatically respond to give. So I said I could see many good things that had come from the revolution, but I could also see that there had been a lot of decay over the period that I had been going. And he said yes, and I think the saddest thing is our youngsters see no future in Cuba. They all see their future outside the country, and his own son was in Chile. So, and that's a real tragedy, because the children, as I speak, you know, they're educated, they perform, they're performing, they do quite comfortable in front of a microphone, in front of an audience. That in itself is a real gift to a child. So it's really amazing how the mix is. It's a very hard equation. So you can't say it's all good and you can't say it's all bad. It's but I can certainly see at the moment they're having a lot of problems, and with smartphones people are able to photograph things that were never seen before, and that has started to really change the dynamic.
What is the general consensus of Castro? I know he's gone now, but his legacy sort of lives on.
It's very hard to say, because people are very careful, even if they know you and care about you, to say really. And the people I knew were not that enamored, but they were very objective in that they did recognize, because some of their friends had gone to other Latin American countries where they had been, were still having coups and revolutions, and they said, be very careful to their friends, be very careful, because we think it's bad here, but it's worse elsewhere. So they're not happy. They believe that they can have better and should have better. For one example, housing is really, there's such a shortage of housing, and there was a whole tower block right beside one of the shopping centres where we had gone to get some food, and we were sitting on the terrace at the top. And I said, well, there's a big apartment block. Why is it empty? And they said, oh, that's for the overseas workers. Now, it wasn't finished, and it hadn't been, no work had been done on it obviously for some time. So that's sitting there empty and unused because it's for foreign workers. And in former times, that would have been Russian. In current times, that would have been Chinese. So it's when you have a dependent economy such as that, it's difficult. And the Castros, in their time, Fidel did one thing. Raúl was not popular. I said, what will happen when Raúl takes over? And I was told the streets will run with blood because he had apparently was involved in a massacre in Guantanamo province. And the people had never forgotten. But it's hard. It's hard. You can't, if you live in a regime like that, you make the best of everything. And that's why they're so innovative and why they have such a wicked sense of humor. They make fun of the whole situation because what else can you do?
Your book is called The Cuban Approach. What exactly is the Cuban Approach?
Well, it's not about missiles. The Cuban Approach is a way of looking at things that I developed on that trip. And it was a month with no plan on the back roads of Cuba. And I just let it evolve. And my phone and the internet assisted me unwittingly by making me completely cut off from everybody for reasons I don't know, but I suspect because I had tried to take an older phone with no GPS, but it probably did have some GPS and that they blocked it. So in that, what I call, as a writer, I call it white space, that period of time where you don't have all the input from your everyday activities, you have time to sit and think about things. And as I traveled, things that I had put in what I call the chest of drawers of I can't deal with it right now, I'll deal with it later in life. You put them away and you think, I really can't deal with it, either emotionally or with energy or whatever. And you just never take them out and reconsider them. And when you do that, your subconscious is sort of going tap, 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 and trying to find a way for you to address them and put them away in a better place, I believe. And so it's a mixture of traveling and learning a lot about the background of Cuba and why it's evolved the way it has, and different things about why a kiwi fruit is called a kiwi fruit and when it's actually a Chinese gooseberry, and different things about the buccaneers and why they were, what they achieved, and the results of their activities on Cuba, and the slave trade, and the native people who gave us a lot of words we use in the Taino, who gave us hammock and barbecue and veranda, and not veranda, I think that was that's an Indian word, but they gave us hurricane is the other one, and barbecues and tobacco. They actually taught the Spanish how to make cigars, but it's all this sort of background. But on the way, there's a philosophical letting go. The tagline is "The Art of Letting Go" on the book, and it's how you readdress all the heartrending things that have happened in your life and take them out of that drawer you've put away because you just couldn't deal with it at the time, and you reassess them. And I found when doing that, it was really surprising. I thought I'd dealt with all these things, but they popped up. And I thought, it's interesting because I have changed my perspective by watching. I had a lot of time on my own, and in that period of time, just sitting waiting, um, I just sat and people watched. And as I did, a lot of things came to my mind, questioning, I wonder why that is, and I wonder where they're going that, and I wonder how they think that's going to work. And so that background is woven into the stories. But at the same time, these things came up, and I found once they came back up, and I thought, gosh, what are you doing in my mind? I thought I dealt with this. I found that all the really negative things fell away, and the good things of that stayed with me to be put into a better place inside. And I think it's a gift we can all give ourselves, is to find that white space and find a way to do the same thing. So it's a little bit of a philosophical guide to how travel can allow you to change your perspective and to really address many of the things that you've got tucked away in that drawer, the chest of drawers.
Well, I think on that note, we're going to have to wrap it up. I hope that COVID goes away soon so people can actually start to travel again, because I think it is an invaluable experience for a lot of people, particularly for people who have never left their own country.
I talk about some examples of that in the book, and they're quite illustrative about the different types. If you travel and never leave home in your mind, then you miss so much of what it can bring to you, and how it can enhance your life.
Yes, broaden one's scope and get out and see the rest of the world.
Yes,
Thank you so much for coming on the show. Do you have a website that you want to give out for the book, or
I
personal
do.
website?
I do. You can find me at paquitalamacraft.com. You can also find me on Amazon as on the author pages under my name. And my travel website is discoverinterestingplaces.com with a hyphen between each word. And the book is available. I have actually recorded it myself, and it's on Audible as well as in bookstores.
Okay, great. Thank you again for coming on the show. It was nice meeting you.